Have you ever wondered, if you can't change the world, could you at least change how you see it? And if you did, would everything around you still feel the same? Chapter 1. Everything starts with the way you see. Ever noticed how two people can walk through the exact same rainy day, yet come out with completely different moods? One curses the rain for ruining their plans. The other, smiling, soaking it in like a free concert, humming an old tune from memory. Same weather, same moment. Two completely different experiences. Why? It's not the rain. It's the perspective. We grow up learning how to succeed, how to act, how to fit in, but rarely are we taught how to see. Not with our eyes, but with our beliefs. With our mindset. And that makes all the difference. The world we live in isn't a fixed reality. It's more like a stage, and you're the director, the actor, and the audience all in one. One person sees chaos. Another sees opportunity. One hears a harsh word and shakes it off. Another takes it home and replays it all night long. You see, it's not always about what happens. It's about how we see what happens. There's a story I love. A man wanders the desert, exhausted and dying of thirst. Eventually, he spots a glass of water half buried in the sand. He walks over, sees it's only half full, and mutters, "Only half? What's the point?" Then walks away. Another traveler, just as tired and dry-mouthed, sees the same glass. He lights up. Half a glass. What luck! And drinks it gratefully. The water didn't change. But the experience did. Because perspective changed. And when you realize how powerful perspective is, you begin to understand. You may not be able to control everything in life, but you can always control how you view it. Imagine you're stuck in a rough season. Maybe your job feels dead-end. Your relationships are strained, and bills keep piling up. If you see it all as proof that you're failing, then everything around you will reinforce that belief. Every rejection, every silence, every tough moment becomes evidence that you're not enough. But what if you paused, took a breath, and asked, what am I being invited to learn here? What's another way to look at this? The world doesn't have to change for your reality to shift. Sometimes you just need to see differently. We blame the world. People are harsh. Life's not fair. I never get a break. But sometimes it's our lens that's cracked, not the world. Once you start shifting that lens, things may still be hard, but you no longer feel like a victim. You feel like a student. You feel like someone being called to grow, to rise, to evolve. Perspective isn't absolute truth. It's a choice. And that choice, it's yours alone. If you wake up every morning and look at the day like a burden, you'll carry that weight everywhere you go. But if you wake up and see it as a fresh start, a new shot at doing better, you'll find the world greeting you with different energy. Think back to a day when you felt energized. Everything seemed lighter. People were kinder. Life flowed easier. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You showed up with gratitude, with openness, with purpose. Here's the amazing part. Perspective can be trained just like a muscle. The more often you choose to see things with clarity, with hope, with curiosity, the more your life begins to reflect that choice. We can't control the storms, but we can choose the lens we look through. And sometimes that's all it takes to shift everything. Chapter 2. Your perspective shapes your reality. Let's be honest, have you ever felt like life just keeps throwing the same problems at you? Over and over? Like the universe is stuck on repeat, testing your patience? Right when things seem to settle, boom, another setback. In those moments, it's easy to think you're cursed, or unlucky, or that life just doesn't like you. But what if it's not fate repeating itself? What if it's your perspective that's stuck? Everyone lives in the same physical world, but no two people live in the same reality. Why? Because reality isn't built solely on what happens. It's built on how we interpret what happens. Here's something wild about the human brain. It's wired to find proof for whatever it already believes. If you believe you're not good enough, your brain will filter the world to prove you right. A kind suggestion will feel like an insult. Passing glance will feel like judgment. And a small mistake will spiral into, I'm a failure. That's not because the world is cruel. It's because your lens is tinted. Think of wearing blue-tinted glasses. Everything looks well blue. But it's not the world, it's your lens. Negativity works the same way. When you see through fear or shame or doubt, the world shrinks. But change that lens, lean into gratitude, into wonder, into openness, and the world begins to expand. Let me tell you about a young woman named Sarah. She got laid off during a round of corporate downsizing. For 2 weeks, she lay in bed, frozen in shame, convinced she had failed. Her world felt small, dark, suffocating. One afternoon, while walking aimlessly through a park, she saw a grandfather helping his little grandson paint. The boy used orange for the sky, purple for trees, and clouds shaped like hearts. Anyone else might laugh it off, but the grandfather smiled and said, "That's some powerful imagination you've got there." At that moment, something clicked. Sarah realized she had been painting her own life with only one color. The color of right and wrong, of should and shouldn't. She had forgotten that she could paint it differently. She began to learn new skills. She joined a creative community. Eventually, she became a freelance writer working on her own terms, finally feeling aligned, not because her circumstances changed, but because her view did. Old lens: I was rejected. New lens: I was released so I could find what fits. And that's what we mean when we say, perspective creates reality. This isn't about faking positivity or denying your emotions. You don't need to pretend everything is okay when it's not. But you can choose how you relate to your experience. You can see hardship as the end or the beginning. You can see criticism as cruelty or feedback. You can see yourself as a failure or as someone still learning. And here's the powerful truth. When you change how you see, you change how you act. And when you change how you act, the world responds differently. That's not magic. That's human psychology. That's energy. That's how the inner world and outer world stay in constant dialogue. If you're full of fear, you'll see threats everywhere. If you're full of hope, you'll spot pathways. If you're still healing, even love can feel like a warning. But once you start healing, even pain begins to look like growth. One day you'll look back and realize, the world didn't change at first. You did. And that made all the difference. Chapter 3. Changing perspective isn't about pretending. It's about responding with maturity. Let's get something clear. Changing the way you see things doesn't mean forcing yourself to be fake positive all the time. It doesn't mean smiling when your heart is breaking, or pretending life is great when everything's falling apart. Changing your perspective isn't about denial. It's about choosing a wiser response, so your pain doesn't get the final word. Life has light. Life has darkness. Both are real. Both are valid. But which one dominates? That depends on where you choose to look. A pessimist sees failure in every opportunity. A fake optimist covers pain with a smile and calls it healing. But a mature soul, someone who's done the inner work, looks reality in the eye without letting it define them. Let me tell you about Jack. Jack was in a bad motorcycle accident. Broken leg. 6 months in bed. He lost his job, lost momentum, lost a lot of confidence. Every car horn outside felt like a reminder that the world was moving on without him. He was stuck. Bitter. Angry. Then one quiet morning, just lying there, staring at the ceiling, he whispered to himself, "How much longer am I going to stay like this? Who do I want to be after all this?" That moment didn't come from motivation. It came from exhaustion. Tired of blaming. Tired of waiting. Tired of hoping someone else would fix it. That was when something shifted, not in his body but in his mind. The pain didn't disappear. But his relationship to the pain did. He started reading again. Writing again. Reconnected with old friends. Found a small freelance gig he could do from his laptop. 6 months later, when he finally stood up again, physically and emotionally, he said something that stuck with me. "That accident didn't destroy me. It taught me to stop running from myself." And maybe that's what growth looks like. Not bouncing back to your old self, but discovering the stronger version of you that can only be found on the other side of struggle. The point here isn't the fall. It's the choice to rise differently. This applies to all of us. You don't have to be grateful for the pain, but you can choose not to let it write your story. You can choose to see heartbreak as dust, something to wipe away, not something to carry forever. In fact, some of the strongest, kindest people I've ever met are the ones who've suffered the most. They've stared into the abyss. They've cried themselves to sleep. And eventually they learned how to smile again. Not because life got easier, but because they got stronger. Have you ever looked back on something that once broke you and felt thankful? Not because it was easy, but because it forced you to grow in ways you never would have chosen? That's the power of perspective. It doesn't erase the pain. It simply changes your vantage point. And when you rise up and look from a higher place, what once felt like your collapse becomes the foundation you now stand on. Remember, you can't always choose your circumstances, but you can always choose your posture. You can choose to sit in defeat, or stand up and lean into growth. You can choose to shut down, or open your heart a little more, even if it's scary. There's a quote I love. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain will come. No one escapes that. But suffering, that's shaped by how you interpret the pain, by what you choose to make it mean. I don't know what you're going through right now. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's confusion. Maybe it's just that quiet ache of feeling lost. But if you take just one thing away from this chapter, let it be this. You always have the power to shift how you see it. You are not weak because you've been down. You're strong because you're still here. Still showing up. Still trying. And real strength? It's not in pretending you're okay. It's in choosing a healthier lens. Even when things are messy, the world won't wait for you to feel ready. But you can be ready by choosing to see things just a little differently. Chapter 4. When you change the way you see, the world responds differently. Here's something most people don't talk about. When you shift the way you see the world, something in the world begins to shift too. Not because people suddenly become nicer. Not because your problems vanish. But because you're no longer showing up the same way. And when your energy changes, so does everything around you. Have you ever walked into a room full of people, and without saying a word you could feel who was confident and grounded, and who wasn't? That's not luck. That's presence. And presence comes from the stories we tell ourselves internally. If you walk through life believing you're not good enough, you carry that belief like invisible armor, defensive, unsure, tense. But if you start seeing yourself as someone who belongs, someone who matters even without being perfect, you begin to move differently, speak differently, connect differently, and suddenly the world mirrors that shift back to you. That's not magic. That's reflection. The world isn't a blank canvas. It's a mirror, constantly reflecting how we show up. If you project doubt, you'll spot resistance. If you lead with trust, you'll notice open doors. If you expect pain, you'll tighten up at every word, expecting the worst. But if you believe that good still exists, no matter how small, it becomes easier to find. Let me tell you about Rachel. For years, she hated her job. Same routine, same coworkers, same complaints. She convinced herself it was a waste of time, that she wasn't making any real difference. But one day, she caught a new intern watching her closely during a meeting. Afterward, the intern walked up and said, "Thanks for how you handled that tough client. I hope I can lead like that someday." Something shifted in Rachel right then. Not because her job changed, but because her perspective did. She realized she wasn't invisible. She was impacting people quietly just by being who she was. That new lens didn't just change how she felt. It changed how she spoke, how she led, how she connected with others. And in return, the energy around her shifted too. Coworkers became more engaged. Her boss noticed. Her work felt meaningful again. All because she looked through a new frame. Or take something even more personal, relationships. If you walk into every conversation thinking, they don't care, then every silence, every delay, every distraction becomes proof of rejection. But if you pause and ask, could they be overwhelmed too? Could they be struggling silently? You create space for empathy, for conversation, for healing. The world doesn't always change instantly. But when you change the way you see it, you start communicating differently. You react with more patience. You listen better. You stop needing to be right and start being real. And that changes everything. I once met an older man named James. He had lost everything, his savings, his home, most of his friends. He was deeply depressed, even considered ending it all. But he made himself a promise. Every day, no matter how small, he would write down one thing worth living for. At first, it was basic. I'm still breathing. Then, the sky is blue today. Later, an old friend called. Bit by bit, his eyes adjusted to see what was still right, not just what was wrong. He didn't force happiness. He simply shifted focus. And from that new lens, he rebuilt. He started mentoring young people. He spoke at schools. And he told me once with a smile, I used to think the world was cruel. But maybe it was just waiting for me to look up. See, you don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to control the world. You just need to decide what lens you're looking through. Because the world is an emotional ecosystem. What you give, you get. You send out fear, you receive limits. You send out gratitude, you receive abundance. You send out bitterness, you attract walls. You send out love, you invite connection. And where does that all begin? Your perspective. So if you're in a fog right now, if life feels unfair, heavy, or out of control, don't rush to blame the world. Ask yourself this instead. Is it possible I'm just looking in the wrong direction? Sometimes it's not the world that needs to change. Sometimes it's just your view that's waiting to be adjusted. And once you do, once you start seeing through a clearer, kinder, more courageous lens, that's when the world starts shifting, one quiet miracle at a time.